Hello. Thank you for listening to Three Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello everyone, welcome again to the Three Legacies Recovery Recordings. I'm your host Paul and I'm an alcoholic. Today is January 28th, 2025, episode 8, and we've been in the middle or close to the middle of a 12-week, looks like it's going to be either 11 or 12-week series on, it's called An Adequate Presentation of the Steps, a Guide for Sponsorship, and it's directed towards for those who are just getting into sponsorship, sponsoring people, or at the same time someone that just needs a refresher. It's just a good tool for those on that journey. And we got our co-host Chris S. from New Jersey. How's it going, Chris?
It's going great, Paul. Glad to be here tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really enjoying this, man. You got a gift for just how you present this stuff. Obviously, you've been doing it for a while, and.
Even in my younger days, I had a gift of gab,
Nice.
We'd be sitting around and I'd be telling stories or whatever. What I'm trying to say is it comes from a place of, I don't know how best to put it without saying, a gift of bullshit.
Yeah.
Sitting around drinking and as when I got sober, there was a little bit of that gift still left, and I just had to change it into something that was maybe more useful.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. I get it. I'm in the same boat, man. Talking about when you had gotten sober, I know you had mentioned that Joe Hawk was your sponsor. He took you to the steps, correct?
Yes, 2001.
Oh wow, okay. And how long did you hang out with Joe?
Listen, Joe had an enormous talent for transmitting spiritual practices into the English language, and it's not easy because so many of these are spiritual principles. They can be misunderstood very easily because your spirituality might be different than my spirituality. Joe had a unique talent in being able to be very explicit in his instructions, taking you through the steps. He was very, very, very conservative about practices. Yeah. And so it was really helpful having somebody. You got to understand, when I went through the steps, Paul, there weren't people in my area taking anybody through the steps. Yeah. This was like the very early 90s. Wow. And it just wasn't done. I was like the first person in my county to start bringing people over my house and taking them through the steps. It just wasn't done. Wow. And so the first handful of times I went through the steps, I did it on my own with the help of Joe and Charlie tapes the first time, with the help of Hawk and Houston tapes, wow, the second, third, and fourth time. Yeah. And by the time I got to know Joe, I was about 11 years sober when, and I'd already had pretty much a recovery experience, but being guided through by someone with deeper experience than I had was transformational. It really was transformational.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've heard stories about how like Mark and him, Mark Houston and Joe there was a quite a while where they just started taking groups of guys through them, right? And me and like 3 or 4, probably 3 or 4 years ago, me and a group of guys, some sponsees had went through the Big Book Awakening, which was an awesome experience, man. That was really great. And then and that came from the Joe Hawk and Dan S., right? Was that
yes,
that
yes, it did. Yeah. So I want to put in a plug for a fellow Tennessee person, Glenn Kay.
Okay.
Glenn Kay was going around the country taping people. He was a big taper in the 90s, and
Nice.
and he recognized Joe Hawk and Mark Houston's talent and went all over the place recording them.
Nice.
And he tells the story like Battle Creek, Michigan, one of the best workshops those two ever did.
Sure.
And Joe went back to his hometown and brought a workshop there. So Glenn tells the story that there's like 60 people show up to the workshop, and after the first session, there's 8 left.
Wow. Yeah. That makes, I get it.
And that's one of the most impactful workshops you can listen to. They were ahead of their time. People weren't ready for that at that period of time. But you go back and listen to those workshops, and you just hear the spirit is speaking through those two guys.
I agree. Yeah, I actually listened to it last week. Actually, the Battle Creek, Michigan. Yeah, I listened to that.
Did you really?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Then can you imagine there being like 60 people, and all of a sudden there's 8?
Yeah. I get it though. I mean, it's kind of the same way around here. I mean, I was telling a friend of mine yesterday. I was like, because I like taking groups of guys through the steps. Because in this particular area that I live at, I think I mentioned in the past that there's like 10 recovery houses within a 5-mile radius from where I'm at. So there's not a lot of people.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then there's not a lot of people that take people through the big book. So I started seeing that a few years ago, and I was like, man, let's start. There's such a need for it. Like, let's just see what happens.
Fertile ground.
Yeah,
There's fertile ground for you, Paul.
Yeah, it's
That's
great. Man. Yeah. And this weekend I'm super excited. So me and my sponsor and my grand sponsor have been going to men's retreats over the last few years together, and I've had such a cool experience through that. That we just started. We got back last year, and I was like, man, I'm going to start a men's retreat in our area. So I did, and this upcoming weekend's our first one. It's a Rule 62 men's retreat. There's only going to be 40 guys. It's Scott L. and from Nashville, and John E. Or it's my grand sponsor and my sponsor. So they're going to be, them and Barkley are going to be doing it this weekend. So I'm super excited about it, man. How about yourself? I'm sure you got all kinds of experience doing retreats. Huh?
Yeah, this weekend I'm in Hilton Head,
Nice.
Doing some convention stuff.
Cool. Nice. All right, buddy. Well, you want to do like what we've been doing, do a recap on just what we've kind of went through so far?
Yeah, but by this time it's going to be a lot shorter.
Yeah.
So the recap is we're moving into step 4. So in step 1, we recognize our alcoholism, our inability to stay separated, and our inability to control it when it's in our body. And we realize that our lives have become unmanageable, and really that's the part that the steps are going to treat. The unmanageability in our life comes emotionally, it comes spiritually, it comes mentally, and it can be physical. We can be in really, really rough shape when we show up, for this thing called sobriety.
Sure.
We can be shaken like a leaf, just with the nervous disposition. You know what I mean? Yeah. And life has become very, very difficult for us to maneuver through. So in step 2, we come to believe that this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, this thing called the steps, this concept called God is going to be a solution for us. We don't know it, but we come to believe it. We don't know it because it hasn't become our experience yet. We have to look around the rooms and say, hey, all these people. There's people that are 15 years sober. There's got to be something going on here. We come to believe in this process. And in step 3, we make a firm decision to give this a shot. To do our job, to go all the way in, sit all the way down with this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. And the next indicated thing we are to engage in. We come to believe that it's it's an action program, so that these actions need to be taken. So often today, people think, the meetings are where you get better. We talked about this last week. The meetings are the waiting room. Yeah. Do we need to be in the waiting room? You don't get to see the doctor without being in the waiting room. Yeah. But the meetings are the waiting room, and the healing is going to come from the process of the 12 steps. We need to come to believe that. Now, I'm going to start reading just a little, just to set us up for step 4.
Okay.
And I think I read this last week. It's on page 64, about 2/3 of the way down.
Okay.
It says, being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So what is step 4? Step 4 is an inventory, a self-examination inventory of the manifestations of self that are the most common that are defeating us. That's what step 4 is. And it says, what's the most common manifestation? Resentment is number 1.
Yeah.
And resentment, when I look back on my personal experience before, any of this inventory work or any of this spiritual work, I'll be honest with you, I was pissed. I was pissed at a lot of people. I was pissed at more people than I wasn't pissed at.
Same.
So I was furious with the police department for giving me DUIs.
Me too. Yeah.
I was furious with the politicians for, not making my life particularly easier.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed and pissed at my family because they weren't gonna toe any kind of line that I think that they should toe or treat me the way I thought I needed to be treated.
Yeah.
I was mad at every boss I had ever had.
Yeah.
I was mad at the neighbors because they would call the police on me when I had these mind-blowingly loud parties all night long, in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was upset with the drug dealers. I was mad at the liquor store, the bars that would cut me off. I was mad at that. I mean, I had a revenge list in my head.
Yeah.
And that would be okay if it wasn't for the fact that I was always going back to that list. I was always going back and obsessing on that list, the people who had done me wrong. So I got to tell you a quick story. Now, the first woman in AA that ever got sober and stayed sober and made an impact was named Marty Mann.
Yeah.
Now, her story is this. She had gone to a hospital, and Bill Wilson had started to engage a couple of psychiatrists around the New York area. One of them was Silkworth, but he wasn't the only one. And some of these people had read the manuscript and had, even before the book was written. And they were starting to suggest this to some of the people in their institutions that they saw as hopeless. Listen, I might as well give them this book. They're not going to make it anyway. Let's see what happens. Kind of a situation. And Marty Mann was given the book Alcoholics Anonymous and read it and kept drinking, right? And went back to this doctor and said, what can you do? What can you do? I don't want to drink myself to death. And he goes, I think you better read that book again. So this time when she read the book, she read it very, very diligently and critically and like you would read a textbook.
Nice. And
the thing that popped out at her was, we must be free of resentment. And just reading that and coming to the conclusion that that is absolutely true was the beginning of her spiritual awakening. Wow. She'll tell that story. That was the beginning of her spiritual awakening. She felt from that moment forward she was gonna stay sober.
Wow.
As she did. It was almost a white light kind of experience. Right. Just that concept. We must be free of resentment. Yeah. So as we look at the inventory here, that's basically on page 65. I also want to preface this, Paul.
Okay.
I've been with people who believe we do a 3-column inventory. Mm-hmm. I believe, I've been with people probably for the most of my time that believe you do a 4-column inventory. Yep. I know people that absolutely swear by a 6-column inventory. And I know people that do check marks. And I know people that do full sentences. And I know people that do all kinds. So the spiritual mechanics are important that you do them. They're not necessarily important that you do them in an exacting way. The most important point of this whole step is that we start to develop a consistent critical self-examination process as a working methodology in our life.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard the same, it's kind of natural. Like, I've heard people talk about the 5 and the 6 column, and I've kind of naturally seen how when I do a 4 column inventory, the answers to what people call the 4 or the 5th and the 6th, what is it like? Usually I've heard people say, what would God have me, or what should I have done instead? What would God have me be? That kind of naturally happens through the process, right? You just kind of get, It's like, oh, okay, wow. Okay. So.
Some people say you do the first 3 columns like it's done in the book, and the rest of the columns are done with your sponsor when you're doing a 5th step. All right. If that's the way you do it, then you're right.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know other people that every single question that gets answered in this is put into a column, and then you bring that to your sponsor as a 5th step. You know what? If you do it that way, you're right.
There you go. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm not going to argue about the mechanics, but let's just look for an example. Let's just look on page 65, and I just want to look at Mr. Brown. Okay.
Yeah.
So the columns that he has are: I am resentful at. You put down the answer to that question. The cause, you put down the answer to that question, and it affects my areas of self. You put the answer to that question down in 3 columns. Let's just look at Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, he's mad at Mr. Brown. The cause is his attentions to my wife. So Brown is hitting on the guy's wife.
Yeah, which is pretty big. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah, let's look one more down. Told my wife of my mistress. I don't know about you, Paul, but that breaks some bro codes, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? That's not something you do.
He's got a good reason to be pissed.
He's hitting on the guy's wife, and he blows up his spot, with his side piece. Then it says, Brown may get my job at the office. Oh my God, he works with Brown, and Brown is trying to get his job.
Yeah.
And now you jump down all the way to the bottom where he's angry at his wife. So he's angry at his wife because his wife likes Brown and wants the house put in her name. So let's look at this. He is hitting on the guy's wife. He blew up his side business. He's trying to get his job at the office. His wife likes Brown and wants, and now Brown wants the house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wants the wife to put the house in the name so he can have the house. Let me ask you, Paul, has anyone ever come at you that hard?
Never, no.
Never in a million years. Bill uses this as an example because he says that the guy has to get rid of the resentment to Brown, or he's gonna die.
Yeah.
So there are no justified resentments. Listen, if there's a justified resentment, I read this and I'm thinking, load the handgun, man. Let's go find Brown, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What Bill is saying is we must be free of resentment, even something like this. So whatever resentments you have, they are not as bad as Brown, and they must be mastered.
Yeah.
We must be free of them to be able to survive alcoholism. That's what Bill is saying here. They call this program a drastic program. That's drastic.
Complete, yeah.
That's drastic, to find a way to escape a resentment like that.
Yeah.
Now, in the next column, it starts to show you kind of a way to escape it, all right? So you can't be angry at somebody unless they're trying to take something you have or interfering with something you want. Yeah. And if you look at these resentments, you'll find what the guy has is threatened, or what the guy wants, his ambitions are threatened, harmed, or interfered with. Yeah. So Bill says there's areas of self. There's sex relations, there's security, there's personal relationships, there's self-esteem. There's pride. There's the 7 areas of self that they go over in this book. Yeah. And when something is harm, threatened, or interfered with, it affects those areas of self. That's what generates this whole resentment. Amen. And a lot of times they can be fancied or real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing.
Go ahead.
A lot of times I'll have like a guy when he's, brand new to this process. I'll usually walk him through a couple of them. And what really it helped me anyways, was those two words, hurt or threatened. Like when we use those words, hurt or threatened, that it says right there at the top of the page, that really, really is, for me, it's been beneficial. It's like, okay, so my security's threatened, because a lot of times people, someone's, well, I don't really know what it is. Well, what's threatened? What feels threatened? And that helps,
Yeah, there's a lot of people that'll say, well, I don't have any resentments.
Yeah.
So you send Christmas cards to every single person you know. How about putting a list down of people you're uncomfortable with?
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's just so much delusion you don't even really realize it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it says, I'm going to go all the way to page 67.
Okay.
And it says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds wrongs others have done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Now, there's a prayer. Some people call it the sick man prayer. That's I don't really like that, but this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. That's the resentment prayer, right?
That's the top of 67 for those that are listening.
Yeah, and we're supposed to say that after we fill out the third column.
Yeah,
and then it says that we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Now, understand it says mistakes. We've made mistakes. I don't care who you are, you've made mistakes if you're human. We all have feet of clay. And we are supposed to answer the following question. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Mm-hmm. Where had we been? So what I do when someone is doing a 4-step is I want at least a sentence on each of those. Nice. Now, if they can't come up with something, that's fine. Maybe we'll talk about it during the 5th step. But we need to start looking at our mistakes and stop focusing on the light on other people. Mm-hmm. If we're going to do a self-examination, we need to focus the light on ourselves. Yeah. And therein lies a path to freedom from the resentment.
Sure, absolutely.
I'll give you a quick example. I'm mad at the IRS. Why am I mad at the IRS? They're auditing me. What areas of self are affected? Oh, my personal relationships, my pocketbook, my self-esteem, my sex relation. But it's a 7-banger. Everything's affected.
Yeah, 7-banger.
Okay. What mistakes did I make? Well, I was selfish. I didn't pay my taxes. I was dishonest. It's illegal to not pay your taxes. Yeah. I was self-seeking. I wanted that money for a boat, Paul. I wanted to buy a boat. I wouldn't be happy without a boat. Yeah. And where was I frightened? I was frightened I wouldn't be happy without a boat. Now I'm frightened that I'm going to go to jail because the IRS is going to arrest me. So now it's not the damn bastards at IRS. Yeah. Now, I've made mistakes, and the IRS is just doing their job. Yeah. I want them to collect taxes. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want police to pull drunk people over and get them off the road. I've got family out there on the road. It's a shift in perception. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sure. It's like a little, without that, there's really no choice or no opportunity for freedom, So,
right. Yeah. Now, I want to point out the economy of this. Okay. You got to understand, we're complicated people. We will complicate a 2-car funeral if you give us a chance. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I have seen him. I had a guy come over my house one time and I am not kidding, a 12-hour 5th step.
That's crazy.
So he wrote and it was autobiographical, and it had to set the stage, and it was a dark and stormy night when I met her, and it just there's an economy to this.
Sure.
that resentment about Mr. Brown is a horrific resentment.
Yeah.
And what did he use? 25 words or something?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I want economy. I don't want somebody coming over who is going to belabor stuff.
Yeah.
And try to justify the resentment.
That's what
like,
usually
well,
happens.
Mr. Brown, he's always been a problem, and I don't want to hear any of that. Read the inventory.
Yeah.
Read the inventory. I'm really interested in where were you selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear.
Amen.
And I want to hear some deep honesty about that. Because this is going to become part of a lifetime practice that's going to keep us in fit spiritual condition and safe and protected from alcohol going back in our body. It's kind of important.
Yeah.
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 All right, let's jump to fear.
Okay.
Another common manifestation that defeats us is fear, self-centered fear. I liken it today to anxiety. The modern people today have no problem talking about anxiety. They have a lot of problem talking about being afraid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I grew up watching John Wayne movies. You know what I mean? And if somebody calls me out into the street, I'm putting on the 6-shooter and I'm going out into the street. Don't call me a coward.
Yeah.
That's not really what they're talking about here. What they're talking about is that general uncomfortability with so many situations in our life this fear that they call keeps us from being where we need to be, doing what we need to be doing. There's so many things that we're uncomfortable with, and we dodge and we weave and we avoid, and the quality in our life suffers because of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
I know that I've only got like 6 months left to finish my college degree, but if I go back, there's going to be a course. I know there's going to be a course that it's going to be hard for me to pass. I'll waste all that time. I'll waste all that money. I know I deserve a raise, but if I ask the boss for the raise and he says no, I'm going to have to hit him. All this stuff goes through our head, and it's what they describe in this book as fear. Mm-hmm. And we really need to start to outgrow it. It says we start to outgrow it, once this inventory practice starts. Mm. So notice the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and his wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It is an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. That's beautifully said. Now, in the 30s, people had tapestries on the wall. They had a lot of wallpaper. They had a lot of stuff that we don't use anymore, right? But everybody had what was called Oriental rugs up on the wall. And one of them, every once in a while, would get what's called a shot thread.
Yeah, I've heard
and
that.
that's when a thread would let go. And when that happened, the whole tapestry is ruined because it would cut in half, and half of it would land on the floor. So he's basically saying fear is a thread that ruins the tapestry of our life.
Wow.
And I believe that today.
Sure.
I believe that today. I was afraid of everything, yet I was crazy, and I was reckless. And I was going to die of misadventure. Hold my beer, watch this. I was that guy. Yet, the anxiety was ripping me up, and I was covering that up with massive amounts of alcohol. For me to be free of alcohol, he's saying I need to be free of that anxiety, and I believe it today. I believe it.
More of us gets us, more closer to it, or we find out what's blocking. What does it say? It says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it had little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things which had been blocking us, right?
Yeah. Unless followed by. Yeah. So without the self-examination, you got nothing, because you're going to misunderstand all your emotional problems.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to move away from them.
Absolutely.
And so your sobriety is going to be restless, irritable, and discontent at best.
Yeah.
And you just don't stay long term. You just don't stay sober if there isn't some kind of calming spiritual force.
Yeah.
You know.
Sure.
So it says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them down on paper. And then we asked ourselves, why did we have them? So that might be your column too. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Yes, every time. We are the captains of our own ship, and we're hitting every reef in sight, and we're crashing into docks and other boats. Yeah. You know, and it's because we're relying on self. We're not relying on a spiritual way of life.
Yeah.
A spiritual way of life is I liken it to a good way of life. And if you're living that way, there's going to be less turbulence in your life. There's going to be less shipwrecks. Yeah. There's going to be, you know, you're not gonna have to, you know, throw life preservers out every 5 minutes.
My buddy says he says God's will is the best deal there is. Yeah.
Yeah. We're now on a different basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Yeah. So as your understanding and relationship with God is really getting going, you know, you trust in the spiritual practices that you're engaging in. You trust in them that there's going to be a positive outcome. You made the decision in step 3 that you were going to do it, and you came to believe that it was going to work in step 2. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Principles, yep.
Now, the third major piece of this inventory, they call it the sex inventory. But again, I would call this a relationship inventory.
I like that.
Because you can put down anybody that you're close to, you know, family members, whatever, friends, you can use this same format. But you got to understand that in 1939, they'd just come out of the Roaring '20s. And if you think we're promiscuous as a society today, you should have been around the Roaring '20s. You know, Bill lived in Manhattan. Wow. Everybody had 2 or 3 mistresses. Wow. that was on Wall Street. You know what I mean? So he's coming out of that culture. So he labels this thing a sex inventory. Yeah. And it says many of us needed an overhauling. So what is an overhauling? A complete rebuild. A complete rebuild of what? Of how we act in relationship to people we care about or want to be close to.
Nice.
You know,
our ideals, pretty much.
That's really what it is. Yeah. So we reviewed our conduct over the years past.
This is on
and
69.
These are the questions. Yeah, 69. So we reviewed our conduct over the years past, and these are the questions that need to be answered. Had we been selfish? Yes. Had we been dishonest? Absolutely. Or inconsiderate, you know, whom had we hurt? Yeah. This is one where, you know, you might have been going out with somebody, but their whole family suffered because of close proximity to you. Yeah. Did we unjustifiably arouse suspicion, jealousy, and bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? Notice it says, what should we have done instead? I'm telling you, we couldn't have done anything, but what we did. Yeah. If we could have done better, we would have.
Sure.
You know, this is a constructive step. Yeah. It helps us move away from bad behavior that we couldn't have changed without some form of recovery process. So we got this all down on paper and we looked at it, and then it asks us to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future relationships. And I'll ask for at least a paragraph or two, because now is a great time to put the attributes you want you want to be showing up with to the next party down, because you have just looked at all the things that don't work.
Yeah.
Now you'll have a good idea of what does. Put those down on paper, and that's a goal statement. That's a mission statement.
And that right there has been like, my current sponsor was the first one that really asked me that question. He asked me about the ideals and would ask me if I had like an ideals list, and man, that was a game changer. Like if I don't have and the cool part is right here, I love, you just touched on it, like this spot right here at the very end of this inventory, like you're at this certain space where you're like, oh man, you're touched. There's something inside of you that's touched, and you realize like, wow, what I should, what would God have me be is pretty much the answer to these ideas.
Yeah. What would God have me be? Listen, we're not going to be perfect, and nobody beats us up like we do. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, we need to. We need to lighten up on ourselves, and the same energy we use beating ourselves up, use that same energy for this constructive process.
Yeah, constructive, yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It says that to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. So there's another warning in here, too. It says, if our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. Now, there's very few places in this book where it says we're going to be quite sure to relapse.
Yeah.
One of them is if our behavior continues to harm other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we need to. This is a constructive process. We claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection.
Yeah.
But we claim spiritual progress. Yeah. You know what I'm saying, Paul?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like you better be able to do that. Now here's another thing that I believe about step 4. There was about a 15-year period of time in my life where I was doing, I was doing annual or semi-annual or biannual runs through the steps, which would include a complete full-blown 4-step. Each time. I've probably done that 6 or 7 times. And it's been a long time since I've done a full-blown inventory, because I've become better and better and better at step 10 and 11. Right. So you'll hear people say things like, you only do the 4-step once, then you live in 10 and 11 and 12.
Yeah.
If that's your experience, you're right.
Yeah.
And then there are people that believe you need to do annual or semi-annual house cleanings. Yeah. And the reason for that is you're not doing a very good job with step 10 and 11. You're not catching things as they come up.
Yeah.
And you need to do annual or semi-annual house cleanings. Yeah. If you're doing that, you're right.
Yeah.
I
heard Charlie P. I love this. He said, he says the same thing, and he was like, the only people I've ever heard that, whenever you said they didn't want to do it, or they, they're like, well, I only did they said, I've never heard anybody that did, 6 inventories, 6 4-step inventories that said, I really wish I'd just stopped on 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. God bless Charlie.
Yeah.
That we would Charlie and I would steal things from each other, and that's one of the ones Charlie stole from me.
Yeah, nice.
I said that one time, and his eyes got really big. He's like,
that's freaking awesome, dude.
Yeah. God, I miss that guy.
Me too.
Oh man, I miss him.
Man.
Yeah. So my personal experience is I've really tried to work very, very hard at 10 and 11. Sure. And also what really helps, Paul, is my 12-step work. I have been doing 12-step work for 35 years.
Nice.
I've been sponsoring. I've been carrying messages into treatment centers. I reach out my hand. I try to be helpful. I try to be helpful at work. I try to be helpful with neighbors.
Yeah.
My 12-step my 12-step is doesn't have guardrails on it anymore. Yeah. It's more a way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, things have really turned out well.
Yeah.
For me in my life, and this practice of constructive, consistent self-examination is essential
Oh man,
for
absolutely
improvement.
Yeah.
It just, how are you going to improve if you don't know what's wrong?
If you don't know, yeah.
You know.
It says a business that which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke.
Yeah. Let's just use an example: a shoe store. If a shoe store doesn't examine its inventory and get rid of the stuff that's not selling,
Yeah.
If the guy that owns a shoe store is, God damn it, I'm going to leave, these shoes, I'm going to leave them there till they sell.
Yeah.
And they're out of style by 5 years. The guy's going to go broke.
Sure.
Recovery is more about removal than it is about acquiring.
Yeah, well, that makes me think, sure, and that makes me think of Don P. He used to share, he said that if you have a kid and you tell them to go in there and clean up your, go in there and clean up your toys in your toy room, the kid's gonna be, oh man. He was like, but if you tell the same kid, go in there and throw all your toys away and we're gonna go buy new ones, now that's, that's enticing, and that's what this, this does.
One of our greats, Sandy Beach, he was one of our greats. Yeah. He used to say, I wake up every morning and I can't wait to see what I'm going to let go of today.
Nice. Yeah. I love Sandy.
Yeah. Sandy was great.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's been great. Yeah. All right. What year did Sandy die? Do you remember? What year he passed away?
Jesus, it was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that.
He was in the D.C. area for a while, wasn't he?
He put together a great workshop. It was actually on the 12 and 12. He did a step workshop on the 12 and 12. You can recognize it because there's a bell. They start the meeting with this bell.
Yeah, I got it on the YouTube channel. Yeah, I got
it. That was I think in the 80s when he did that.
Yeah,
early 80s.
Yeah.
But he lived in Florida probably the last 20 some years of his life in the Tampa area.
Nice. Okay. Great, man. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so, is there anything else that you could think of? One thing I'd like to add is this was what was and I kind of touched on it earlier, but the first handful of times I went through this, I didn't really understand that what we're trying to discover is the things which had been blocking us, and I just kind of wrote some stuff down, tried to get as honest as I possibly could and share them with another person. And I kind of missed the whole self piece. I didn't realize it was like, oh, okay, the different ways that self manifests in my life, and also what I really started seeing when we go into step 6, where it says, are we now ready to let God remove all these things which are objectionable? I really didn't have a clue that it was objectionable because I thought it was just me sharing stuff with someone, and I started seeing they were objectionable whenever I started seeing how this is blocking this power from flowing through me,
Yeah, these are roadblocks. Yeah. These are, these are turds in the punch bowl. Yeah. They really are. And listen, the thing that we're up against, the thing that we're trying to overcome is these manifestations of self that defeat us.
Yeah.
And what we're up against is self.
Yeah.
So self is going to try to block us from taking this exercise. It's going to force us into procrastination. It's gonna get us to justify ignoring and dodging and weaving.
Yeah.
And when that happens, pay attention, because that's the manifestation of self.
Sure,
that is defeating you, that's keeping you from doing this exercise that takes you away from that toxic experience of self-consciousness.
Yeah,
and self doesn't want to die.
No, and like you said earlier, if you're not doing a pretty a normal self-examination, like on a regular basis, not normal, but a normal basis, if you're not doing that, doing the nightly review, you don't really see any of that stuff. I didn't. I remember when I first started doing nightly review, which was a couple years ago. I started with a group of guys, and and now I got a couple groups of guys. Me and my sponsor send it back and forth, and a handful of sponsees. But when they first start doing that, and after you have this experience, you start seeing holy crap, man, I'm gonna mess this whole day up on my own. I'm messing this whole thing up. I'm selfish, self-centered, self-seeking. I'm only thinking about me. You can sum it all up to one word: inconsiderate. It's like, man.
Yeah. Selfish.
Yeah.
So when we're taking somebody through this step, I think it's really, really important to give them enough instruction so that they know how to do it, but also give them a timetable to have it finished by.
Nice, yeah.
All right, set the appointment for the 5th step.
Nice, yeah.
When you're instructing them on the 4th step, because we will find every reason in the world. Self will the condition of self that must be recovered from is going to find every way possible to put it off until the last minute.
Sure.
So a lot of times people, Paul, you're going to be over my house at noon this Saturday.
Yeah.
When do you think you're finishing your 4th step?
Yeah.
Like 11:30 Saturday morning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the spiritual discipline is to be accountable to a sponsor.
Amen.
Get a sponsor you're going to be accountable to.
Yeah.
Explain to someone who's asking you to sponsor them that they must be accountable for this work.
Yeah.
You're not going to make them wax your car or lend you money, but what you are going to do is you're going to hold them accountable to this spiritual work.
Yeah.
And you're going to be a pain in the ass about it.
Sure.
And the minute you're unwilling to move through these steps with me, that's the moment I'm not useful to you anymore.
Yeah.
And we're wasting both of our time.
Yeah, and I'll even share when I'm working with a guy, because you know how when you're working with different guys, some of them are, BS and they don't really want to do it, whatever. And then you got these other guys, like, so for example, I got a sponsor right now that has just started, sponsoring guys. I always let him know, because this guy's been pretty willing, like since day one. He's just always, had this willingness. So my relationship with him, when he's starting to sponsor a guy for the first time, he's sitting there thinking that's the only kind of sponsor-sponsee relationship he has context for, So I'll let him know, like, hey, look, I don't have to jump your ass from time to time because you're doing this stuff. You're willing. But when there's another guy that's doing this, I'll even have, like, say, for example, if I ask someone, like, we're going to, say we got 2 weeks to finish this work, if I have to, I'll even say, all right, look, pull out your calendar, Let's see, Monday at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 8, you're putting in, X amount of hours. Wednesday, you got time Wednesday? Okay, Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you're putting in this amount of hours. And then I'll have them, hold them accountable to it. I'll call them or have them call me that day and let me know how it went,
Yeah, the 4th step takes 4 hours in a week.
Yeah.
It takes 4 hours in a month. It takes 4 hours in a year.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is it takes about 4 hours.
Yeah.
Like you can't, to save your own life, you can't put 4 hours aside. That's general. Some of them take more than that. Some of them take less than that. But you know what I'm saying.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And it goes back to the powerlessness. If I really have like if I really believe that I'm powerless and I need to find some kind of power, my life depends on it, I'm probably going to go through this process, right?
Yeah, if you're not right in the 4th step, then you didn't make a decision to follow this spiritual path, and you didn't make a decision because you didn't really believe that this solution was going to work for you, and you probably didn't really believe this solution was going to work for you because you didn't get with the powerlessness and the alcoholism. There's something you missed in step 1.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, this is great, man. I really enjoyed this. You added a couple things to that I really enjoyed. So you have anything else you want to share with?
No, that's it. Please do this. If you're listening to this and you've not done a 4th step, take it from both of us. It could be the most important piece of work you've ever done for the quality in your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree. And so next week we're going to do step 5, and we had talked before that we may be doing step 6 and 7 together on one episode, correct?
That's something that can be done fairly quickly.
Great. Okay. So next week we will be doing step 5, and that is going to be on, February the 4th. we're going to be getting back together for step 5. And then also February 5th, the next day, is the first episode that me and Katie P are going to be doing. Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah.
Man. Oh, please tell her I love her.
I will. I'm sure she'll be talking quite a bit about you. Yeah, she's told me a lot of stories, so I'm super excited about it, man. So, all right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you, buddy, and thank you again for just being of service and taking the time out of your life to do this. And it's really making a difference, man. I appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you for putting the work in to get something like this up.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. And I'll talk to you next week, man.
Okay.
See you, buddy.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.